Would I choose consulting again if I could start over? Perhaps if you've graduated within the last 2 to 3 years, then you'll be considering whether consulting is the right choice for you. I don't know about you, but some of the best advice that I've ever had was from people who have been through what I was about to go through. People who can give you advice based on hindsight, can tell you what they would do again and what they would do differently. And then you don't have to make any of the mistakes that they made. So given I've spent the first 10 years of my career in consulting, I'm going to tell you whether I'd do it again. And I'm going to tell you whether I'd do anything differently too. Welcome back, by the way. I'm Charlie, a consulting director and remote business owner. And my Consultant Explorer channel is to help you be so successful in the early stages of your career in consulting that you are set up for total freedom to do whatever you want to in life. And that includes telling you what you will and what you won't get from consulting, and whether it's the right choice for you in the first place. I'm going to tell you about the reasons why I would choose consulting again, and then I'll tell you about the reasons why I wouldn't. And then we'll be able to draw a conclusion about whether, on balance, I would choose to start my career in exactly the same way, given the opportunity to start over. And for context, by the way, I effectively went straight into consulting after uni, although I had spent some time working in insurance and law before that, during my uni years and for the 6 months after graduating. But the main thing to remember is I started consulting on a grad scheme, and I spent the next 10 years progressing up the career ladder, ultimately to where I am now. So the first reason should be pretty evident from this beautiful backdrop. That's Ben Nevis, by the way. The life I lead right now is utterly awesome, and it's only because of the depth and the quality of skills that I acquired in consulting that this life is possible. Consulting is a high-skill profession, and when you work in it, you develop skills that are both highly sought after and not in huge supply, which means that you become a valuable resource in lots of different scenarios and can command great compensation for it, both financially and qualitatively, with things like flexibility of personal choices. And the skills that I learned don't necessarily have to be the skills that you'd learn. There are lots of skills on a spectrum from very technical to very strategic that you can develop for yourself, which will each help the direction that you take in the future. The next reason I'd do it all over again is acceleration. This one, honestly, is massive if you're ambitious. You won't even be 25 years of age before you're managing the day-to-day work of people. You may not even be 25 before you're representing people for promotion. And you certainly won't be 25 before you're given huge amounts of project-related responsibility for massively important initiatives at global client organisations. Initiatives that often make news headlines. If you're a smart and capable individual, why should you have to wait until you're older to do these things? It'll only delay your career if you do. So starting in consulting is a brilliant way to jumpstart your career, and it means that when you leave consulting, you'll be jumping into something that likely wouldn't have been accessible had you not accelerated your experience within consulting first. Okay, next is people. I'm not sure I always fully appreciated this because I was used to working alongside smart people at school and at uni. But there is no doubt that in consulting, I have always worked alongside big brains. People who pick things up fast, who put the effort in and go the extra mile, who care about the quality of their output. It creates this environment of achievement with a sense of pride about your work, which inspires you to push yourself and to always do your best work. The other thing about people in consulting is that the very nature of the job means that you're interacting with, honestly, hundreds of people all the time. Your project team alone might be upwards of 50 people. And then there's everyone in your department, in your extracurriculars, in your new starter group. Let's put it like this. You don't scroll to find someone in your IMs. You search their name because there are just too many people to scroll through otherwise. So you'll develop a professional network in consulting that is by default massive and can serve you into the future, whatever that future looks like. Okay, this next one I started to see only because my friends started asking my advice on it. And when they asked, it struck me that I'd had an opportunity to learn something that they hadn't had. In consulting, you learn how all the different types of job roles come together into one big project team to deliver an output, which is often a new piece of software. You'll know what every role does. You'll know which roles are dependent on the outputs or inputs of others. You'll know where the crunch points are and the critical paths. You'll even learn how to manage all of them together to deliver the desired output. That's pretty incredible on reflection, and it'll be important knowledge if you're ever in a position where you're leading something in the future. The next reason is business context. And by that I mean, in consulting, you get to work with a full spectrum of company sizes, from some of the biggest companies to some of the most recent startups. Your clients are usually global organisations, the leaders in their industries, and the tech that you implement at those clients is also often from the world's largest software companies. But sometimes you partner with much, much smaller tech startups, which is what I did. And you get to work alongside their teams implementing that tech at your clients too. So you see how big business operates, but you also see how new companies start too. And the perspective that that gives you helps you understand not only the best ways to run a company, but also where you might want to work yourself in the future. The next reason is efficiency and effectiveness. In consulting, there is no time to waste. You have so much going on all the time that you effectively have no choice but to do everything in the most efficient way that you can. Which means that even for all the basics like scheduling meetings and sending emails and taking notes and making slides, you develop efficiencies on autopilot that can save you in aggregate hours of time. That's hours of additional time in your career in the future that you'll have to spend on important things, giving you an advantage over others. It might sound small, but it translates into massive impact. I've been able to take whole days off or reinvest my time into personal projects where others wouldn't have had that chance. And it's all part of how I've got to where I am today. Reason 7 is career skills. As a consultant, your job requires you to settle into new scenarios with new people and have a positive impact rapidly. It requires you to be proactive with where you're going and what you're doing. It requires you to advocate for yourself and articulate your achievements. And it requires you to own and deliver things with the resources and time available. Once you can do all of that, you can go anywhere with your career and know that you'll be able to fly. Because wherever you go, you'll know how to pick things up quickly, how to be proactive, how to make a positive impact, deliver what's needed by when it's needed, and advocate for yourself and your own progression. In a nutshell, you'll have mastery over the fundamentals of personal performance and progression. On to the next reason. This is about developing an objective sense of your skills. I imagine that when you work in a different industry and not in professional services, and you're working on work that isn't project related, you don't get the opportunity very often to step outside of your work and to see what you did, how you did it, and therefore what skills you have. By contrast, in consulting, because you're hopping projects, clients, teams all the time, you have this regular opportunity to draw parallels and see contrasts, and ultimately to see what skills you're using and reusing, what you've learned to do differently and better each time, and to watch yourself progressing. And the more that you can see your own skills, the better that you'll represent yourself in any career conversation, any interview, or any networking opportunity. Right, this is my penultimate reason. One of the things that I appreciate the most about my consulting career is that I've always worked in tech. To be honest, this is one of the reasons I chose to join the industry anyway, because tech is so evidently the future. But working in it offers so much more than future-proofing your career. You get to see how it actually works. You develop a sense of the speed at which it's evolving. You understand the nuances of the different types of tech and how they all fit together. There's a sense of familiarity that you develop that helps you fill in the gaps in your own knowledge. It helps you feel comfortable in new techie situations, and it helps you to identify more specifically which part of this tech landscape that you want to spend more time in the future. And my last reason, and I've put this last because it genuinely is the least important. Working in consulting in the junior stages of your career definitely comes with a level of prestige that can be helpful in networking scenarios. When you have an opportunity to meet people who might be important to your career, it can help if they both recognise the name of the company that you're working for and also associate it with people who have a certain level of smarts about them. Not that I necessarily agree with the way that people seem to use these things as proxy evaluators. Okay, so that was 10 reasons that I would absolutely join consulting in the early stages of my career if I were given the opportunity to start all over again. But what about the more juicy stuff? What regrets do I hold about the last 10 years of my career? Or what would I do differently if I had the opportunity again? There is definitely some part of me that wishes that I'd had the opportunity to get even closer to the development of tech. And by that I mean doing some of the actual coding. And that's because it would have potentially helped me in the early stages as a solo tech startup founder to build and test prototypes in pursuit of product market fit. Being able to build stuff yourself without needing to find or pay other people to help out and help speed things up in the very early days. But I also recognise the benefits of not being so readily able to build stuff, because jumping into building stuff can be a massive time suck when in reality there are much cheaper, faster and easier ways to test your ideas out. So whilst I do harbour some feelings of I wish I knew more about coding, I also don't necessarily think I'd swap the broader experience that I have instead for that. The other thing that I don't feel I got enough from in consulting is proximity to tech that was on the real forefront of innovation. When your clients are global organisations with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees and billions of dollars of annual revenue, their appetite for working with new tech startups is very risk averse. Or as the saying goes, innovation is born out of hardship. They don't feel that they have the need to take the risk involved with implementing new and untested technologies. So whilst I've had the opportunity to work with world-leading and exciting technologies, I would have liked to have spent more time working with technologies that I felt were really breaking new boundaries. And that's because that's where my personal interest lies. So it might not be the same for you. That said, I did get to work alongside some very cool and innovative startups, and I was given budget to run POCs, proof of concepts, with them, which was awesome. And it was through my work with these startups that I was actually given a number of opportunities to speak at global conferences, AI conferences, data conferences, which was very cool. But my work on all of that was very much side of desk. I had to spend my own personal time on all of it in evenings and at weekends in order to be able to nurture and take those opportunities. The priority in consulting was serving the needs as defined by our clients instead. And this made it hard for me to progress my POC initiatives in a number of important ways. Now again, my experience here is based on my personal interests and career goals, so it might not necessarily be something that you come up against. But if having a public presentation presence or working on cutting edge tech is a priority for you, it's worth considering. For me personally, reflecting on both the cutting edge tech point and the public tech persona point, these things became a sticking point, but only because I'd learned enough through all of the consulting projects I'd been on to want to progress into this space. So I wouldn't swap my consulting experience for this reason either. It was through the experience that I gained in consulting first that I evolved my understanding and interests to the point of wanting these things. Somewhat relatedly, I also had this nagging feeling of not using my brain to its full potential all the time in consulting. There were certainly times where I really maxed out my learning curve, but over time, as I started to work on more and more projects that fell within a specific niche, the day-to-day wasn't complex enough to keep me mentally really stimulated anymore. Now, I actually think that the learning here is that I didn't change things up fast enough, and instead I continued on in the same job for too long. So the only thing that I'd do differently next time on this point is that, change things faster. One final thing that I'd say about what I wish I'd done differently, and again this relates to my startup ambitions, so the direction of my future career. The proportion of people that I am surrounded with now who are inspiringly entrepreneurial is much, much higher than when I was full-time consulting at a large consulting company. And given my ambitions, I find it inspiring to be around people who are thinking differently about the world, or thinking differently about how to solve particular problems, or thinking differently about how to run the life that they want to live. So you may or may not experience this same feeling, but if you do want to start your own company one day, then it's definitely something to bear in mind. This alone wouldn't be a reason for me not to go into consulting like I did. But I think what I would change is I would be more proactive earlier about mixing in entrepreneurial circles in my free time. For example, by joining meetups or attending pitch nights whilst holding down a consulting day job. So all in all, I think it's evident that whilst there are some things that I would do differently, like pursue things in addition to my consulting career, I would 100% start my career in consulting again. I genuinely don't think that there is any other career that creates the size and pace of springboard for ambitious and tech-minded people than consulting. And if you've taken some value from my pros and cons today, then let me know by leaving a comment or clicking the like button. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I wish you all the best with your exploring.